So for DOS Summer number 8, we're going to go back to one of the early games from MS-DOS that really helped us cement that DOS was an up-and-coming serious operating system that people were writing software and games for. Of course, Wolfenstein, everyone who's a gamer should recognise the name, but not sure how many people really know the full depth of the history behind it. So in 1981, a really talented programmer called Silas Warner had set up a company with a friend of his called Muse Software. They'd built a few bits of productivity software, they'd built their own sound engine, music engine for the Apple II, and they had a few games under their belt by that point as well, and it was doing okay. And Silas was playing around with a prototype. He had some ideas about what he wanted to do, but he couldn't really get where he wanted to take it. He had some ideas, but he basically ran out of steam. And people kept suggesting to put it in space, but he was like, nah, there's too many space games at the moment. I need something else. And he kind of put it down and left it. A little while later, he was watching the movie The Guns of Navarone, which is a fantastic 1961 World War II movie with a star-studded cast. The general premise of the film is that there is an impregnable German fortress set up on the Aegean coast, and the British fleet can't pass without being blown to smithereens by the guns. And so there's a plan to send in a small team of British commandos that will sabotage the impregnable fortress. Fantastic movie, really well made, and it's a great story as well. So he watched that, and he liked the general premise of the commandos breaking in, and he thought, I wonder if there's something there. And apparently, around about the same time, maybe in the same day or another day, he was playing a game called Berserk, which is an earlier game. It's on a bunch of platforms, one of them being the Atari 2600. And in Berserk, you'll notice it looked a bit similar to what he was coming up with, but you're a bit more interactive. Rather than just collecting stuff, you're fighting enemies, you're shooting enemies and hiding from enemies. And he quite liked that idea. So he thought, I wonder if I put those two things together, if I have commandos breaking in or breaking out of rooms, hiding from Nazis, maybe trying to loot things like Berserk, maybe I might have an idea. And he came up with the idea for a game called Wolfenstein, which he made for the Apple II. Wolfenstein itself was really popular. It sold anywhere between 30,000 and 50,000 copies, kept Muse Software afloat for a little while, and it got a little bit of fame for Silas Warner. Then in 1982, he ported it over to the Apple 8-bit series, the 400 and 800 series, and it was pretty popular on that. Then a year later, he ported it to the Commodore 64, which of course is brown. And then in 1984, the IBM PC, by this point, if you remember, had been going for 2.5-3 years, and we were now up to MS-DOS 2.0. So Castle Wolfenstein kept Warner busy for about 3 years with all the various ports that he was doing for it. But then there was a lot of interest in writing a sequel, so he did. He wrote a slightly updated version called Beyond Castle Wolfenstein in 1985, which was probably one of the last hits for Muse Software. They struggled along for another couple of years, producing a few little games, but then they folded. And that was where it ended for about 5 or 6 years, until a small group of people who had been doing contract programming for a company called Softdisk that made shareware games decided to strike out on their own, and they formed a company called Ideas from the Deep, or ID. And I think pretty much everyone knows who ID Software are by now. And their main programmer, John Carmack, was they'd made a bunch of sprite-based games before, like Commander Keen, and he wanted to break out into 3D. He'd seen a few 3D type games, and he thought that he could probably do it better. And so he did. He made a game called Catacomb 3D using a system called raycasting. Now, the one thing that anyone who knows John Carmack or knows about him is that he never stands still. So at the moment that Catacomb 3D came out, he wanted to make something bigger and better, and they were looking around for ideas. And so John Romero, who used to have an Apple II and really liked it, remembered Wolfenstein. And so he said, hey, how about trying to take the Catacomb 3D engine and turn this old game called Castle Wolfenstein, where you have to sneak around, break into things, steal stuff and escape, and we do it in 3D. And so the idea for Wolfenstein 3D was born. Wolfenstein 3D had a semi-spin-off / second part called Spear of Destiny, which was made by someone else. And then in 2001, there was Return to Castle Wolfenstein. 2003, Wolfenstein Enemy Territory. 2008, an RPG on mobile, which not a lot of people have heard of. 2009, they rebooted it for some reason, instead of just doing like Wolfenstein 2. Then in 2014, they came out with Wolfenstein New Order. 2015, Wolfenstein The Old Blood. Then finally, they decided to do Wolfenstein 2, called The New Colossus. And then lastly, in 2019, a very middling thing called Wolfenstein Young Blood. It was probably an attempt to appeal to the younger gamers. And they had a sort of a VR thing called Cyberpilot attached to it, which didn't make a huge impact. But the main Wolfenstein line is still very much alive, and they're planning on bringing out a Wolfenstein 3, Punch the Nazi one more, just to be sure. Of course, I am completely lying. Let's go back and have a look at that original Castle Wolfenstein, because that's where it all began. And because this is about DOS, we're going to have a look at the 1984 DOS port. So one thing that's interesting about Wolfenstein is that it came out in the very early days of DOS, as we spoke about. And Microsoft had, if you remember from the Docember a few days ago, when they built DOS 1.0, they effectively copied a bunch of the APIs over from CP/M in order to just get it up and running. And then in DOS 2.0, they decided to drop a bunch of the APIs that they didn't like and build something new. But when they did that, a few things were broken. I know, Microsoft breaking things, unheard of. And that was around about the time when Wolfenstein was coming out, 1984. And the DOS 2.0 became DOS 2.1. But around about that time, it was known that there were bugs. And so Wolfenstein itself actually shipped with a patch. But we can have a look at the instructions. So it says, thank you for publishing Muse's IBM version of Castle Wolfenstein. There is a problem on DOS 2.1 when use of the PC Junior only that may cause the computer to hang during keyboard input. The following steps will ensure that you do not have this problem. Make a copy of your DOS 2.1 diskette using disk copy. While leaving the copy disk in drive B, insert your supplemental DOS diskette in drive A and type copy debug.com. Debug.com is just a utility, so you're copying a file from the DOS system disk to your Wolfenstein disk, and then you're using that utility to effectively patch the game. But we're not playing on an IBM Junior, and this isn't DOS 2.1, so we don't need to patch it. You might also remember that I was talking about slowing things down with MoSlow, which is the usual way for slowing things down. So you can give it a percentage, like /10, to slow it down to 10%, which means that what it'll do is it will occupy the processor with a null loop over and over and over again for about 90% of the time. But luckily I'm running it in DOSBox X, so therefore I don't need to run MoSlow. I can just, if I think it's running too fast, I'll just slow it down using the cycles of DOSBox. Alright, so let's get in there. Castle Wolfenstein. Okay, so that, if you saw that number come up at the beginning, that was the random seed. I'll go with keyboard. Alright, so apparently when this first started on the Apple II, it would take quite a long time for it to build. So I'm searching a dead body. Keys! That's handy. Okay. The keys on this are not incredibly intuitive. You do have a gun, which you can fire. Got him. Now, what you heard there was digitized speech. That was Silas Warner himself. He recorded that using Muse's own software, making Castle Wolfenstein one of the first games to actually have digitized speech. If not the first. It's also credited as being one of the earliest games that had sneaking as one of its main mechanics. Now, one thing we have to do now is we have to search chests. This mechanic, this waiting mechanic, was listed as one of the most frustrating things about the game. Can you imagine kids nowadays sitting there waiting for over 3 minutes for something to count down? Well, people were happy to back in the day, but I'm nowhere near as patient as that. I'm going to speed up the cycles to get that counter down. Okay, that's close enough. Right, let's bring the cycles back down again. 7, 6. Right, we're back to real time again. Uniforms. All right. 10 seconds to get the uniforms. Oh, man. Right, well, hopefully this will give me a disguise. I'm in uniform. Yay! I have my little swastika on. So now I look like a German guard. Actually, did I search him? Did I search him before? Searching. 3 bullets. Okay. Now, anyone who's played the board game Colditz will recognise the kind of style of this. In Colditz, you start out in one of the rooms around the castle Colditz, and then you have to sneak out round the grid, avoiding the German guards. And I have a sneaky feeling that this game probably borrows a little bit from it. Okay, so let's see if we can get out through this door. Okay. Trying your keys. 9 seconds to wait for keys. Oh my god. Yes. Okay, right. Let's see, he can't see me. Uh-oh, here you can. Okay, come on then. You're in for a rude awakening. Lol. Oh. Right, let's see if I can open this. Come on. It'll take 187 seconds. Oh no, it won't. Emulate 486DX266. Ta-da! Emulate an 8288. Bratwurst. Okay, let's get some bratwurst. Oh, get off. There we go. Okay, let's set off. Oh, it's still in 386 mode. 9 bullets and keys. Okay, actually let me slow it down a little bit. And the game carries on much like this through a number of generated rooms. I think there is a total of about 60 rooms to explore on your way out. You collect more uniforms and food and guns, weapons. You get grenades, bullets, all kinds of stuff to help you on your way out. And just playing it, you get better at sneaking around and just taking out the guards a little bit more effectively. So I hope that gives you a nice idea of what the first Castle Wolfenstein played like, which is where we get pretty much the entirety of the Wolfenstein 3D game line from. And if you want to go play it, you can find it on all good DOS archives, and it does play, as you can see, in DOSBox really quite nicely. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next DOSember video. Bye bye.